Chapter 4. The personal matter that absorbed Levin during his conversation with his brother was this. Once, in a previous year, he had gone to look at the mowing, and being made very angry by the bailiff, he had recourse to his favorite means for regaining his temper. He took a scythe from a peasant and began mowing. He liked the work so much that he had several times tried his hand at mowing since. He had cut the whole of the meadow in front of the house, and this year, ever since the early spring, he had cherished a plan for mowing for whole days together with the peasants. Ever since his brother's arrival, he had been in doubt whether to mow or not. He was loath to leave his brother alone all day long, and he was afraid his brother would laugh at him about it. But as he drove into the meadow and recalled the sensations of mowing, he came near deciding that he would go mowing. After the irritating discussion with his brother, he pondered over this intention again. I must have physical exercise, or my temper will certainly be ruined, he thought, and he determined he would go mowing, however awkward he might feel about it with his brother or the peasants. Towards evening, Konstantin Levin went to his counting-house, gave directions as to the work to be done, and set about the village to summon the mowers for the morrow, to cut the hay in Kalenov meadow, the largest and best of his grasslands. And send my scythe, please. Send it to Tat for him to set it, and bring it around tomorrow. I shall maybe do some mowing myself, too, he said, trying not to be embarrassed. The bailiff smiled and said, Yes, sir. At tea the same evening, Levin said to his brother, I fancy the fine weather will last. Tomorrow I shall start mowing. I'm so fond of that form of field labor, said Sergey Ivanovitch. I'm awfully fond of it. I sometimes mow myself with the peasants, and tomorrow I want to try mowing the whole day. Sergey Ivanovitch lifted his head and looked with interest at his brother. How do you mean? Just like one of the peasants, all day long? Yes, it's very pleasant, said Levin. It's splendid as exercise, only you'll hardly be able to stand it, said Sergey Ivanovitch without a shade of irony. I've tried it. It's hard work at first, but you get into it. I dare say I shall manage to keep up. Really? What an idea. But tell me, how do the peasants look at it? I suppose they laugh in their sleeves at their master being such a strange fish. No, I don't think so. But it's so delightful, and at the same time such hard work, that one has no time to think about it. But how will you do about dining with them? To send you a bottle of Lafite and roast turkey out there would be a little awkward. No, I'll simply come home at the time of the noonday rest. Next morning, Konstantin Levin got up earlier than usual, but he was detained giving directions on the farm, and when he reached the mowing grass, the mowers were already on their second row. From the uplands, he could get a view of the shaded cut part of the meadow below, with its grayish ridges of cut grass and the black heaps of coats taken off by the mowers at the place from which they had started cutting. Gradually, as he rode towards the meadow, the peasants came into sight, some in coats, some in their shirts mowing, one behind another in a long string, swinging their scythes differently. He counted 42 of them. They were mowing slowly over the uneven, low-lying part of the meadow where there had been an old dam. Levin recognized some of his own men. There was old Yermil in a very long white smock, bending forward to swing a scythe. There was a young fellow, Vaska, who had been a coachman of Levin's, taking every row with a wide sweep. Here, too, was Tat, Levin's preceptor in the art of mowing, a thin little peasant. He was in front of all and cut his wide row without bending, as though playing with the scythe. Levin got off his mare and, fastening her up by the roadside, went to meet Tat, who took a second scythe out of a bush and gave it to him. It's ready, sir. It's like a razor, cuts of itself, said Tat, taking off his cap with a wide smile and giving him the scythe. Levin took the scythe and began trying it. As they finished the rows, the mowers, hot and good-humored, came out into the road one after another, and laughing a little, greeted the master. They all stared at him, but no one made any remark, till a tall old man with a wrinkled, beardless face, wearing a short sheepskin jacket, came out into the road and accosted him. "Look ye now, master, once take hold of the rope, there's no letting it go," he said. And Levin heard smothered laughter among the other mowers. "I'll try not to let it go," he said, taking his stand behind Tat and waiting for the time to begin. "Mindy now," repeated the old man. Tat made room, and Levin started behind him. The grass was short close to the road, and Levin, who had not done any mowing for a long time, and was disconcerted by the eyes fastened upon him, cut badly for the first moments, though he swung his scythe vigorously. Behind him he heard voices. "It's not set right. Handle's too high. See how he has to stoop to it," said one. "Press more on the heel," said another. "Never mind, he'll get on all right," the old man resumed. "He's made a start. You swing it too wide, you'll tire yourself out. The master sure does his best for himself, but see the grass missed out? For such work us fellows would catch it." The grass became softer, and Levin, listening without answering, followed Tat, trying to do the best he could. They moved 100 paces. Tat kept on moving without stopping, not showing the slightest weariness, but Levin was already beginning to be afraid he would not be able to keep up. He was so tired. He felt as he swung his scythe that he was at the very end of his strength, and was making up his mind to ask Tat to stop. But at that very moment Tat stopped of his own accord, and stooping down, picked up some grass, rubbed his scythe, and began wetting it. Levin straightened himself, and taking a deep breath, looked round. Behind him came a peasant, and he too evidently was tired, for he stopped at once without waiting to mow up to Levin, and began wetting his scythe. Tat sharpened his scythe and Levin's, and they went on. The next time it was just the same. Tat moved in with sweep after sweep of his scythe, not stopping nor showing any signs of weariness. Levin followed him, trying not to get left behind, and he found it harder and harder. The moment came when he felt he had no strength left, but at that very moment Tat stopped and wetted the scythes. So they mowed the first row, and this long row seemed particularly hard work to Levin, and when the end was reached, and Tat, shouldering his scythe, began with deliberate stride returning on the traces left by his heels in the cut grass, and Levin walked back in the same way over the spaces he had cut, in spite of the sweat that ran in streams over his face and fell in drops down his nose and drenched his back as though he had been soaked in water. He felt very happy. What delighted him particularly was that now he knew he would be able to hold out. His pleasure was only disturbed by his row not being well cut. "I will swing less with my arm and more with my whole body," he thought, comparing Tat's row, which looked as if it had been cut with a line, and his own unevenly and irregularly lying grass. The first row, as Levin noticed, Tat had moved specially quickly, probably wishing to put his master to the test, and the row happened to be a long one. The next rows were easier, but still Levin had to strain every nerve not to drop behind the peasants. He thought of nothing, wished for nothing, but not to be left behind the peasants, and to do his work as well as possible. He heard nothing but the swish of scythes, and saw before him Tat's upright figure moving away, the crescent-shaped curve of the cut grass, the grass and flower head slowly and rhythmically falling before the blade of his scythe, and ahead of him the end of the row, where would come the rest. Suddenly, in the midst of his toil, without understanding what it was or whence it came, he felt a pleasant sensation of chill on his hot, moist shoulders. He glanced at the sky in the interval for wetting scythes. A heavy, lowering storm cloud had blown up, and big raindrops were falling. Some of the peasants went to their coats and put them on. Others, just like Levin himself, merely shrugged their shoulders, enjoying the pleasant coolness of it. Another row and yet another row followed, long rows and short rows, with good grass and poor grass. Levin lost all sense of time, and could not have told whether it was late or early. A change came over his work, which gave him immense satisfaction. In the midst of his toil there were moments during which he forgot what he was doing, and it all came easy to him, and at those moments his row was almost as smooth and well cut as Tat's. But so soon as he recollected what he was doing, and began trying to do better, he was at once conscious of the difficulty of his task, and the row was badly mown. On finishing yet another row, he would have gone back to the top of the meadow again to begin the next, but Tat stopped, and going up to the old man said something in a low voice to him. They both looked at the sun. "What are they talking about? And why doesn't he go back?" thought Levin, not guessing that the peasants had been mowing no less than 4 hours without stopping, and it was time for their lunch. "Lunch, sir," said the old man. "Is it really time?" "That's right, lunch then." Levin gave his scythe to Tat, and together with the peasants, who were crossing the long stretch of mown grass lightly sprinkled with rain to get their bread from the heap of coats, he went towards the house. Only then he suddenly awoke to the fact that he had been wrong about the weather, and the rain was drenching his hay. "The hay will be spoiled," he said. "Not a bit of it, sir. Mow in the rain, and you'll rake in fine weather," said the old man. Levin untied his horse and rode home to his coffee. Sergey Ivanovitch was only just getting up. When he had drunk his coffee, Levin rode back again to the mowing before Sergey Ivanovitch had time to dress and come down to the dining room. Chapter 5. After lunch, Levin was not in the same place in the string of mowers as before, but stood between the old man who had jokingly accosted him, and now invited him to be his neighbor, and a young peasant who had only been married in the autumn, and who was mowing this summer for the first time. The old man, holding himself erect, moved in front, with his feet turned out, taking long regular strides, and with a precise and regular action which seemed to cost him no more effort than swinging one's arm in walking, as though it were in play. He laid down the high even row of grass. It was as though it were not he, but the sharp scythe of itself, swishing through the juicy grass. Behind Levin came the lad Mishka. His pretty boyish face, with a twist of fresh grass bound round his hair, was all working with effort, but whenever anyone looked at him, he smiled. He would clearly have rather died than admit it was hard work for him. Levin kept between them. In the very heat of the day, the mowing did not seem such hard work to him. The perspiration with which he was drenched cooled him, while the sun that burned his back, his head, and his arms, bare to the elbow, gave a vigor and a dogged energy to his labor, and more often now came those moments of unconsciousness, where it was possible not to think what one was doing. The scythe cut of itself. These were happy moments. Still more delightful were the moments when they reached the stream where the rows ended, and the old man rubbed his scythe with the thick, wet grass, rinsed its blade in the fresh water of the stream, ladled out a little in a tin dipper, and offered Levin a drink. "What do you say to my home brew? Good, huh?" said he, winking. And truly, Levin had never drank any liquor so good as this warm water with grass bits floating in it, and a taste of rust from the tin dipper. And immediately after this came the delicious slow saunter, with his hand on the scythe, during which he could wipe away the streaming sweat, taking deep breaths of air, and look about the long string of mowers and at all that was happening around in the forest and the country. The longer Levin mowed, the oftener he felt the moments of unconsciousness in which it seemed not his hands but the scythe that swung, the scythe mowing of itself, a body full of life and consciousness of its own, and as though by magic, without thinking of it, the work turned out regular and well finished. These were the most blissful moments. It was only hard work when he had to break off the motion, when he had to think, when he had to mow around a hillock or a tuft of sorrel. The old man did this easily. When a hillock came, he changed his action, and at one time with the heel and another with the tip of his scythe, clipped the hillock round both sides with short strokes. But while he did this, he kept looking round and watching what came into his view. At one moment he picked a wild berry and ate it, or offered it to Levin. Then he flung away a twig with the blade of the scythe. Then he looked at a quail's nest from which the bird flew just under the scythe, or caught a snake that crossed his path, and lifting it on the scythe as though on a fork, showed it to Levin and moved it away. For both Levin and the young peasant behind him, such changes of position were difficult, both of them repeating over and over again the same strained movement, were in a perfect frenzy of toil, and were incapable of shifting their position and at the same time watching what was before them. Levin did not notice how time was passing. If he had been asked how long he had been working, he would have said half an hour, and it was getting on to dinner time. As they were walking back over the cut grass, the old man called Levin's attention to the little girls and boys who were coming from different directions, hardly visible through the long grass, and along the road towards the mowers, carrying sacks of bread, dragging in their little hands, and pitchers of the sour rye beer, with cloths wrapped round them. Look at the little emmets crawling," he said, pointing to them, and he shaded his eyes with his hand to look at the sun. The mowers did 2 more rows. The old man stopped. "Come, master, it's dinner time," he said briskly. And on reaching the stream, the mowers moved off across lines of cut grass towards their piles of coats, where the children who had brought their dinners were sitting waiting for them. The peasants gathered into groups, those further away under a cart, those nearer under a willow bush. Levin sat down by them, disinclined to go away. All constraint with the master had disappeared long ago. The peasants got ready for dinner. Some washed, the young lads bathed in the stream, others made a place comfortable for a rest, untied their sacks of bread, uncovered the pitchers of rye beer. The old man crumbled up some bread in a cup, stirred it with the handle of a spoon, poured water on it from the dipper, broke up some more bread, and having seasoned it with salt, he turned to the east to say his prayer. "Come, master, taste my sop," said he, kneeling down before the cup. The sop was so good that Levin gave up the idea of going home. He dined with the old man and talked to him about his family affairs, taking the keenest interest in them, and told him about his own affairs and all the circumstances that could be of interest to the old man. He felt much nearer to him than to his own brother, and he could not help smiling at the affection he felt for this man. When the man got up again, said his prayer, and lay down under a bush, putting some grass under his head for a pillow, Levin did the same, and in spite of the clinging flies that were so persistent in the sunshine, and the midges that tickled his face and body, he fell asleep at once, and only waked when the sun had passed to the other side of the bush and reached him. The old man had been awake a long while, and was sitting up wetting the sides of the younger lads. Levin looked about him, and hardly recognized the place. Everything was so changed. The immense stretch of meadow had been mown, and was sparkling with a peculiar fresh brilliance, with its lines of already sweet-smelling grass in the slanting rays of the evening sun. And the bushes about the river had been cut down, and the river itself, not visible before, now gleaming like steel in its bends, and the moving, ascending peasants in the sharp wall of grass of the unknown part of the meadow, and the hawks hovering over the stripped meadow, All was perfectly new. Raising himself, Levin began considering how much had been cut and how much could still be done that day. The work done was exceptionally much for 42 men. They had cut the whole of the big meadow which had, in the years of serf labor, taken 30 scythes 2 days to mow. Only the comers remained to do where the rows were short, but Levin felt a longing to get as much of the mowing done that day as possible, and was vexed with the sun sinking so quickly in the sky. He felt no weariness. All he wanted was to get his work done more and more quickly, and as much done as possible. "Could you cut Mashkin upland too? What do you think?" he said to the old man. "As God wills. The sun's not high. A little vodka for the lads?" At the afternoon rest, when they were sitting down again, and those who smoked had lighted their pipes, the old man told the men that Mashkin upland's to be cut. "There'll be some vodka." "Why not cut it? Come on, Tat, we've got to look sharp. We can eat at night." "Come, lads, keep it up," said Tat, and he ran on ahead almost at a trot. Get along," said the old man, hurrying after him and easily overtaking him. "I'll mow you down. Look out." And young and old mowed away as though they were racing one another. But however fast they worked, they did not spoil the grass, and the rows were laid just as neatly and exactly. The little piece left uncut in the comer was mown in 5 minutes. The last of the mowers were just ending their rows when the foremost snatched up their coats onto their shoulders and crossed the road to Mashkin upland. The sun was already sinking into the trees when they went with their jingling dippers into the wooded ravine of Mashkin upland. The grass was up to their waist in the middle of the hollow, soft, tender, and feathery, spotted here and there among the trees with wild heartsease. After a brief consultation, whether to take the rows lengthwise or diagonally, Prohor Yermolin, also a renowned mower, a large black-haired peasant, went on ahead. He went up to the top, turned back again, and started mowing, and they all proceeded to form in line behind him, going downhill through the hollow and uphill right to the edge of the forest. The sun sank behind the forest. The dew was falling by now. The mowers were in the sun only on the hillside, but below, where a mist was rising, and on the opposite side, they mowed into the fresh, dewy shade. The work went rapidly. The grass cut with a juicy sound, and was at once laid in high, fragrant rows. The mowers from all sides, brought together closer in the short row, kept urging one another on to the sound of jingling dippers and clanging scythes, and the hiss of the whetstones sharpening them, and good-humored shouts. Levin still kept between the young peasant and the old man. The old man, who had put on his short sheepskin jacket, was just as good-humored and free in his movements. Among the trees they were continually cutting with their scythes the so-called birch mushrooms, swollen fat in the succulent grass. But the old man bent down every time he came across a mushroom, picked it up, and put it in his bosom. "Another present for my old woman," he said as he did so. Easy as it was to mow the wet, soft grass, it was hard work going up and down the steep sides of the ravine. But this did not trouble the old man. Swinging his scythe just as ever, and moving his feet in their big plated shoes with firm little steps, he climbed slowly up the steep place, and though his breeches hanging out behind his smock, and his whole frame trembled with effort, he did not miss one blade of grass or one mushroom on his way, and kept making jokes with the peasants and Levin. Levin walked after him, and often thought he must fall as he climbed with the scythe up the steep cliff, where it would have been hard work to clamber without anything. But he climbed up and did what he had to do. He felt as though some external force were moving him. Chapter 6. Mashkin upland was mown, the last row finished, the peasants had put on their coats and were gaily trudging home. Levin got on his horse, and parting regretfully from the peasants, rode homewards. On the hillside he looked back. He could not see them in the mist that had risen from the valley. He could only hear rough, good-humored voices, laughter, and the sound of clanking scythes. Sergey Ivanovitch had long ago finished dinner and was drinking iced lemon and water in his own room, looking through the reviews and papers which he had only just received by post, when Levin rushed into the room, talking merrily, with his wet and matted hair sticking to his forehead, and his back and chest grimed and moist. "We mowed the whole meadow. Oh, it is nice, delicious. And how have you been getting on?" said Levin, completely forgetting the disagreeable conversation of the previous day. "Mercy, what you look like," said Sergey Ivanovitch, for the first moment looking round with some dissatisfaction. "And the door, do not shut the door," he cried. "You must have let in a dozen at least." Sergey Ivanovitch could not endure flies, and in his own room he never opened the window except at night, and carefully kept the door shut. "Not one, on my honor, but if I have, I'll catch them. You wouldn't believe what a pleasure it is. How have you spent the day?" "Very well. But have you really been mowing the whole day? I expect you're as hungry as a wolf. Kozma has gotten everything ready for you." "No, I don't feel hungry. I had something to eat out there, but I'll go and wash." "Yes, go along, go along. I'll come directly," said Sergey Ivanovitch, shaking his head as he looked at his brother. "Go along, make haste," he said, smiling, and gathering up his boots, he prepared to go too. He, too, suddenly felt good-humored and disinclined to leave his brother's side. "But what did you do while it was raining?" "Rain? Why, there was scarcely a drop. I'll come directly. So you had a nice day, too? That's first-rate." And Levin went out to change his clothes. 5 minutes later the brothers met in the dining-room. Although it had seemed to Levin that he was not hungry, and he sat down to dinner simply so as to not hurt Kozma's feeling, yet when he began to eat, the dinner struck him as extraordinarily good. Sergey Ivanovitch watched him with a smile. "Oh, by the way, there's a letter for you," he said. "Kozma, bring it down. And please, shut the doors." The letter was from Oblonsky. Levin read it aloud. Oblonsky wrote him from Petersburg. "I have had a letter from Dolly. She's at Erzgashova, and everything seems to be going wrong there. Do ride over and see her, please. Help her with advice. You know all about it. She will be so glad to see you. She's quite alone, poor thing. My mother-in-law and all of them are still abroad." "That's capital. I will certainly ride over to see her," said Levin. "Or we will go together. She's such a splendid woman, isn't she?" "They're not far from here, then?" 25 miles, perhaps 30, but a capital road. Capital. We'll drive over." "I shall be delighted," said Sergey Ivanovitch, still smiling. The sight of his younger brother's appearance had immediately put him into a good humor. "Well, you do have an appetite," he said, looking at his dark red sunburnt face and neck bent over the plate. "Splendid. You can't imagine what an effectual remedy it is for every sort of foolishness. I want to enrich medicine with a new word, arbitsker." "Well, but you don't need it, I should fancy." "No, but for all sorts of nervous invalids." "Yes, it ought to be tried. I had meant to come to the mowing to look at you, but it was so unbearably hot that I got no further than the forest. I sat there a little and went on by the forest to the village, met your old nurse, and sounded her as to the peasants' view of you. As far as I can make out, they don't approve of this. She said, 'It's not a gentleman's work.' Altogether, I fancy that in the people's ideas there are very clear and definite notions of certain, as they call it, gentlemanly lines of action, and they don't sanction the gentry's moving outside bounds clearly laid down in their ideas." "Maybe so, but anyway, it's such a pleasure. I've never known such in my life, and there's no harm in it, you know, now is there?" answered Levin. "I can't help it if they don't like it, though I do believe it's all right." Altogether, pursued Sergey Ivanovitch, you're satisfied with your day? Quite satisfied. We cut the whole meadow, and such a splendid old man I made as a friend out there. You can't fancy how delightful he was. Well, so you're content with your day, and so am I. First, I solved 2 chess problems, and one a very pretty one, a pawn opening. I'll show it to you. And then I thought over our conversation yesterday. Our conversation yesterday? Said Levin, blissfully dropping his eyelids and drawing deep breaths after finishing his dinner, and absolutely incapable of recalling what their conversation yesterday was about. I think you are partly right. Our difference of opinion amounts to this, that you make the mainspring self-interest, while I suppose that interest in the common good is bound to exist in every man of a certain degree of advancement. Possibly you are right, too, that action founded on material interest would be more desirable. You are altogether, as the French say, too primitive a nature. You must have intense, energetic action, or nothing. Levin listened to his brother and did not understand a single word, and did not want to understand. He was only afraid that his brother might ask some question which would make it evident that he was not listening. So that's what I think it is, my dear boy, said Sergey Ivanovitch, touching him on the shoulder. Yes, of course, but do you know, I won't stand up for my view, answered Levin with a guilty, childlike smile. Whatever it was I was disputing about, he wondered. Of course I'm right, and he's right, and it's all first rate. Only I must go round to the counting-house and see to things. He got up, stretching and smiling. Sergey Ivanovitch smiled too. If you want to go out, let's go together, he said, disinclined to be parted from his brother, who seemed positively breathing out freshness and energy. Come, we'll go to the counting-house if you have to go there. Oh, heavens, shouted Levin, so loudly that Sergey Ivanovitch was quite frightened. What's the matter? How's Agafea Mikhailovna's hand? Said Levin, slapping himself on the head. I'd positively forgotten. It's much better. Well, anyway, I'll run down to her. Before you have time to get your hat on, I'll be back. And he ran downstairs, clattering with his heels like a spring rattle.